There comes a moment that splits life in two, a moment so quiet yet so final that nothing is ever the same again. It's the moment the one who has always given, endured, absorbed, and sacrificed finally looks inward and says, "Enough," not out of anger, not out of ego, but out of awakening. And what Carl Jung uncovered about this exact moment completely reshapes how we understand true personal transformation. Stay with me, because this is where everything begins to shift. Carl Jung devoted his life to understanding the psyche, and through his work on individuation, he noticed something most people overlook. Highly sensitive people, what we now call empaths, often live in a state of chronic self-sacrifice. They carry emotions that aren't theirs. They solve problems they didn't create. They dim themselves so others can feel bright. Jung realized this pattern is not kindness alone, it's imbalance. And the psyche will never tolerate imbalance forever. Jung explained this through the principle of enantiodromia. When something is pushed too far in one direction, it inevitably swings to the opposite. The empath who gives endlessly will one day shift towards self-preservation, not because they've become cold, but because survival demands it. And here's the revelation most people misunderstand. When an empath chooses themselves, they don't become selfish. They become psychologically sovereign. This is where Jung's concept of the shadow becomes critical. Every person carries disowned parts of themselves. For empaths, the shadow often contains their ability to say no, to disappoint others, to walk away, to protect their own energy. These traits were buried because they felt wrong or selfish. But Jung discovered that healing doesn't happen by staying kind at all costs. Healing happens by integrating the shadow. When the empath integrates this shadow, something remarkable occurs. They don't lose their compassion. They gain discernment. They begin to sense where their energy is honored and where it is exploited. This awakening often arrives through pain. Jung called it a psychic crisis, the moment when the empath realizes their kindness has been feeding the wrong people, that their empathy has been used as leverage, that their silence has been mistaken for permission. This realization feels like a collapse, but it's actually the beginning of differentiation. The empath starts separating their emotions from others' emotions, their needs from others' expectations. Jung said this is one of the hardest psychological tasks a human can face, because it requires letting go of the identity built around being needed. But once this separation begins, the transformation becomes irreversible. Here's where the shift becomes undeniable. Jung observed that when someone reclaims their energy, they don't just change themselves, they change every relationship around them. The people who relied on their endless giving are forced to face themselves. The manipulators lose their supply. The guilt-driven control collapses. Jung called this the withdrawal of projections, and it's deeply unsettling for those who benefited from the empath's self-abandonment. At this stage, the empath stops explaining. They stop justifying their boundaries. They stop trying to convince others that they deserve respect. They reach what Jung described as psychological autonomy, the ability to validate oneself without external approval. And this is where the power becomes quiet but absolute. Jung noted that true transformation is not loud or theatrical. It doesn't announce itself. It enforces itself. The empath doesn't argue their worth. They live it. They don't beg for reciprocity. They simply stop giving where there is none. This kind of calm firmness is deeply threatening to people who thrive on chaos, because manipulation fails when approval is no longer currency. What emerges next is what Jung called the integration of opposites. The empath learns to hold compassion and boundaries at the same time, understanding without self-betrayal, forgiveness without access. This is not contradiction, it's the transcendent function, the ability to hold paradox without breaking. They become soft where it's safe and immovable where it's not. In Jung's view, the final stage of individuation is wholeness. And the awakened empath embodies this fully. They no longer need toxic bonds to feel needed. They no longer confuse chaos with connection. They no longer rescue broken people to feel valuable. They practice conscious relationship, engaging only where there is mutual respect, sincerity, and balance. And this is the moment that makes them untouchable. Jung said that a person who has integrated their shadow and chosen themselves becomes complete unto themselves. They don't fear abandonment because they've become their own refuge. They don't fear loneliness because they've discovered their own depth. They stop pouring light into black holes, disguised as people, and begin sharing it only where it's honored. This is the psychology of the empath who finally chooses themselves. Not selfish, not cold, but whole. And once you understand this, you will never again underestimate the quiet power of someone who has learned that choosing themselves isn't wrong. It's sacred.